My daughter spent 5 months embroidering a landscape panel for Uncle Brent. He didn't even unwrap it fully, just tossed it straight into the trash bin in front of all the guests. Sentimental crap, he said and turned away. Our parents just laughed. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just stood up, took my daughter's hand, and walked out. The next morning, I canceled every transfer that had kept them afloat for the past 9 years. They thought I was bluffing, until the tow truck arrived. Her brother Brent had received $95,000 7 years ago to open a craft brewery in Portland's Pearl District. The loan paperwork sat in her filing cabinet, co-signed with her name beneath his, collateral listed as his Ford F-150. For the first 24 months, payments arrived like clockwork, $1, $6.50 on the first of every month, automated transfers pinging her account before dawn. Then the delays started. A week late became 2 weeks became a month. Brent blamed supply chain issues, talked about rising costs and increased competition from new breweries flooding the market. Elizabeth drove to the Pearl District one Tuesday afternoon without warning and found the brewery doors locked at noon, prime lunch hour, dust coating the tap handles visible through the window. She located Brent 3 blocks away at a sports bar, sprawled across a corner booth with college buddies, beer pitcher half empty, phone face down on the sticky table. When she asked about the missed payment, he waved her off with a laugh that sounded more like a dismissal, told her to relax and give him time. His eyes never quite met hers. Elizabeth drove home in silence, knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Hazel sat in the passenger seat asking why Uncle Brent never visited anymore. Elizabeth kept her voice steady and lied that he was busy building something important, even as she calculated how many months she'd been subsidizing his bar tabs. At work, her colleague Rachel caught sight of the banking alerts during their weekly video check-in. Rachel, another single mother who'd clawed her way up through the architecture firm, didn't sugarcoat observations. She pointed out that Elizabeth had been bankrolling 3 adults for nearly a decade while raising Hazel alone. Elizabeth deflected with the standard excuse about family helping family, about obligations that came with shared blood. But Rachel's words lodged somewhere behind her ribs, a splinter she couldn't extract. That night, Elizabeth reviewed her spreadsheets, rent payments, loan advances, emergency medical bills she'd covered, car repairs she'd financed. The total made her nauseous. She closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen, listening to Hazel's rhythmic breathing from upstairs, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not broken yet, but fracturing. Like foundation concrete developing hairline splits before the collapse. Thanksgiving was supposed to be different. Elizabeth had reserved a table at a downtown restaurant with river views, confirmed the reservation twice, even ordered Hazel's favorite pumpkin cheesecake in advance. Brent canceled 3 hours before they were supposed to meet, texting that the brewery demanded his attention during the holiday rush. Elizabeth accepted the excuse without argument, told Hazel they'd celebrate quietly at home instead. But at 7 that evening, Hazel's phone lit up with notifications. Facebook posts flooding her feed from cousins she barely knew, all tagged at Glenn and Sharon's house in Salem. String lights glowed across the backyard in the photos, folding tables overflowing with food, dozens of faces she recognized from family gatherings years ago. Brent stood center frame in multiple shots, flannel shirt crisp and new, raising a beer bottle toward the camera. Hazel's face crumpled when she saw the posts. She asked why they weren't invited, why Uncle Brent had lied, her voice small and confused in a way that made Elizabeth's jaw tighten. The girl had spent 5 months on her gift, a hand-embroidered landscape of the Columbia River Gorge, every stitch painstaking work done after homework and on weekends. She'd saved 3 months of allowance for the redwood frame, custom cut at the craft store downtown. Brent's name glowed in gold thread in the corner. Elizabeth knew refusing to go would hurt more than showing up uninvited, so she grabbed her keys and told Hazel they'd stop by briefly, just to deliver the gift. The house blazed with noise when they arrived, music thumping from portable speakers, voices competing over each other, the sharp crack of beer bottles opening. Hazel clutched the wrapped frame against her chest, navigating through clusters of relatives who barely glanced their way. Brent dominated the center of the yard, surrounded by friends Elizabeth didn't recognize, gesturing wildly while telling some story that had everyone laughing. Hazel pushed through and held up the gift, her voice bright with forced cheer as she wished him happy Thanksgiving. Brent looked down at the package, smile fading into something colder. He tore off the wrapping paper without care, glanced at the embroidered landscape for maybe 3 seconds, Then his mouth twisted into a sneer. He asked what kind of sentimental garbage this was supposed to be, his words slurred slightly with alcohol. Before Hazel could respond, before Elizabeth could move forward, he pivoted and hurled the frame directly into the trash bin beside the food table. Glass shattered audibly against the metal bottom. The frame split along one corner. Hazel froze, eyes wide and filling with tears she refused to let fall. Glenn and Sharon sat in lawn chairs 10 feet away, both watching the scene unfold. Glenn chuckled into his beer. Sharon shook her head and announced loudly that kids these days always made these little craft projects, her tone dismissive enough to draw agreement from nearby relatives. Someone's phone appeared, recording the moment. Elizabeth felt every eye turned toward her, waiting for the explosion, the scene, the drama they could discuss for months afterward. She bent down, retrieved the broken frame from the trash, brushed away food scraps stuck to the glass. Her hands remained steady. She took Hazel's hand, the girl's fingers ice cold despite the mild evening, and walked toward the gate. No one called after them. No one apologized. Music continued pounding behind them as they reached the car. Hazel climbed into the passenger seat silently, pressed tissue against a small cut on her cheek where a glass shard had caught her. Elizabeth started the engine and pulled away from the curb while laughter and shouting faded in the rearview mirror, swallowed by distance and November darkness. The house stood silent when they returned. Hazel retreated upstairs without speaking, closed her bedroom door with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than slamming. Elizabeth sat at the kitchen counter, phone screen glowing in the darkness, and opened her banking app. The scheduled transfers stared back at her. $1, $850 to her parents set to process in 48 hours, $2,100 to Kira's landlord 3 days after that. 9 years of these withdrawals, automated and unquestioned, bleeding her account dry on a rhythm as predictable as breathing. Her thumb hovered over the first payment. She pressed cancel. Green confirmation flashed across the screen. The second payment, cancel. Another confirmation. Then the third, the fourth, every recurring transfer she'd set up years ago when family had still meant something other than obligation and exploitation. She navigated to her email and composed a message to Lane Foster, the attorney who drafted Brent's loan 7 years earlier. The subject line read simply Loan 4478, immediate collection. The body contained 3 sentences requesting formal default proceedings against her brother, repossession of the Ford F-150 listed as collateral, and authorization to pursue all legal remedies available. She attached the original loan documents, photographs of the truck with visible license plates, and her most recent accounting showing 18 months of missed payments totaling $29,700 plus accumulated interest. She hit send before doubt could surface. Lane's response arrived 20 minutes later, time-stamped 11:47 p.m., brief and professional. He confirmed the default notice would go out by courier the following morning, and that the repossession company he contracted with regularly could execute pickup within 72 hours. He requested she forward any recent communications from Brent regarding the debt. Elizabeth scrolled through months of ignored text messages, excuses about cash flow problems, promises to catch up next month, angry accusations that she was being unreasonable, and forwarded the entire thread without comment. Lane replied with a single line acknowledging receipt, and noting the messages strengthened their position significantly. Upstairs, Hazel's desk lamp glowed through the crack under her door. Elizabeth climbed the stairs quietly and found her daughter hunched over the broken embroidery frame. Carpenter's glue bottle open beside her, sandpaper smoothing the splintered corner where the wood had cracked. The girl worked methodically, testing the fit of the pieces, applying pressure to close the gap. No tears, no dramatics, just focused concentration on repairing what could be saved. Elizabeth watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. Not breaking, but crystallizing. The hairline fractures that had been spreading for years finally connected, and what emerged wasn't weakness but absolute clarity. She understood exactly what needed to happen next. She returned downstairs and pulled out the folder containing every financial record related to her family. Spreadsheets detailing 9 years of rent payments, grocery reimbursements, medical copays, car insurance premiums, emergency loans never repaid. She calculated the total, $247,000 given without expectation of return, without gratitude, without even basic respect. The number sat on the page like an indictment. She filed everything chronologically, labeled each section with dates and amounts, and stored the folder in her fireproof safe. Not because she planned to demand repayment, but because she needed proof when they inevitably accused her of abandoning them without cause. Then she changed her banking passwords, removed her parents and siblings from her account alerts, and blocked their phone numbers system-wide. The final step took less than 5 minutes, but felt like severing an anchor that had been dragging her underwater for nearly a decade. The tow truck arrived at the Pearl District Brewery at precisely 10 in the morning, 3 days after Lane Foster filed the repossession order with the county. Brent emerged from the building still wearing yesterday's shirt, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly as he shouted at someone about overdue supplier invoices. 2 men in reflective vests stepped out of the cab and moved with practiced efficiency toward the Ford F-150 parked in the loading zone. They hooked the chains under the front axle and activated the hydraulic lift before Brent registered what was happening. He sprinted toward them, yelling about making payments next week, about having the money coming soon, but the driver simply showed him the legal authorization and climbed back into the truck. The Ford lifted off the pavement, rear wheels dangling. Tourists stopped on the sidewalk to film the scene on their phones. Brent chased the tow truck for half a block until it turned the corner and disappeared into traffic. The online auction listing appeared that same evening. Starting bid $32,000, no reserve price. Photos showing every angle of the vehicle including mileage and minor cosmetic damage. Within 72 hours, a dealership in Eugene purchased it for $43,000, funds wired directly to Lane's trust account to cover the outstanding loan balance. After deducting the sale proceeds, Brent still owed $62,000 in unpaid principal and accumulated interest. Lane filed the judgment with the state court system, creating a legal claim against any future wages or assets Brent might acquire. The brewery landlord posted a 3-day pay or quit notice on the front entrance 48 hours after the repossession. Brent scrambled together partial rent using cash advances from 3 different credit cards, buying himself 1 additional week. But customers stopped coming. Rumors about financial instability spread quickly through Reddit threads and Yelp reviews posted by people who'd witnessed the tow truck incident. 2 weeks later, the power company disconnected electricity for non-payment. The refrigeration units went silent, spoiling $200 worth of beer in kegs. The landlord changed the locks 7 days after that. Brent arrived with a duffel bag to collect personal belongings, found the chain across the door, kicked it once hard enough to dent the metal, then walked away. Glenn and Sharon received a certified letter at their Salem address, copies of the auction receipt and the court judgment against Brent. No explanatory note attached, just documentation. 2 days later, their landlord taped an eviction notice to their front door citing $2,600 in overdue rent plus late fees and legal costs. Sharon called Elizabeth's office reception and left a message stating that Glenn needed his insulin and couldn't afford the prescription without help. The HR department forwarded the voicemail to Elizabeth's work email per protocol. She deleted it without listening. Within 30 days, Glenn and Sharon checked into a Motel 6 off Interstate 5, paying $900 cash for a month's stay because they couldn't provide a credit card for the security deposit. The neon vacancy sign blinked red through thin curtains every 3 seconds throughout the night. Brent borrowed a friend's 2008 Honda Civic and started driving for Uber Eats, earning roughly $3 per delivery in tips after subtracting $40 daily for gas. Most nights he slept in the car in Walmart parking lots, engine running for heat until morning. Kira lost her townhouse 60 days after Elizabeth canceled the automatic rent transfers. She moved onto a friend's couch with 2 suitcases and whatever else fit in her sedan. Elizabeth blocked every family phone number in her contacts, changed her email address through her company's IT department, and deactivated all social media accounts. No calls returned, no messages answered, no final chances offered. Hazel asked one evening over dinner whether her grandparents would be okay. Elizabeth set down her fork and said they had choices available and had made the ones they wanted. The girl nodded and returned to her homework without further questions. The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon 1 year later, plain envelope with a Portland postmark, but no return address. Elizabeth found it wedged between utility bills and grocery store circulars when she collected the mail. Inside, 3 pages torn from a yellow legal pad, handwriting shaky and uneven across the lines. Brent's words sprawled desperately across the paper. Admissions of being wrong, claims of finally understanding everything, pleas for forgiveness. The final paragraph mentioned Glenn facing possible amputation if they couldn't afford a specialist, framed as a last chance for reconciliation. Elizabeth read it standing at the kitchen island while morning light filtered through new blinds they'd installed the month before. Hazel sat across from her pouring cereal. 16 now, with longer hair and a steadier voice that no longer wavered when discussing difficult topics. She glanced at the pages and asked if it was from Uncle Brent. Elizabeth nodded once, folded the letter back into its envelope, and dropped it into the trash bin beneath yesterday's coffee grounds and an empty yogurt container. That same afternoon, she purchased a blank postcard from the drugstore near her office. White, no image, just empty space for a message. She wrote 5 words in block letters. "We are no longer family," and mailed it from the corner box without adding her signature. Only the postmark would identify the sender. Brent never responded. They'd moved 3 months earlier to a quiet neighborhood in North Portland. A house with mature trees in the yard and Hazel's bedroom window facing the Cascade Mountain Range. Every phone number changed, including the veterinarian for the cat they'd adopted from the shelter. Old email addresses stopped working after the forwarding period expired. Social media accounts deleted permanently, profiles scrubbed from search engines. Hazel flourished in the new space. She set up a woodworking bench in the garage using birthday money and learned to operate power tools through online tutorials. Her latest project, a cedar jewelry box with dovetail joints and a hidden compartment, won second place at the county fair. The trophy sat on the mantel beside the blue ribbon. Elizabeth received a promotion at work, senior architect with flexible hours and stock options that vested over 4 years. No more HR incidents to document, no security camera footage to archive. She and Rachel organized virtual game nights twice monthly, their kids building elaborate Lego structures in the background while they competed in trivia contests. During a hike through the Columbia River Gorge one Sunday, Hazel asked whether Elizabeth missed them. The girl held her water bottle loosely, trail dust coating her sneakers. Elizabeth thought about the shattered embroidery frame, the midnight pounding on their old front door, the cardboard signs held outside her office building. She told Hazel she missed who she'd thought they were, not who they'd actually proven themselves to be. Hazel nodded, adjusted her backpack straps, and continued up the trail without further questions. Sunset colored the sky orange and pink behind the mountain ridges, the air cooling as they descended. Family wasn't an ATM dispensing money on demand. Blood didn't entitle anyone to unlimited withdrawals without consequences. When you stopped giving, masks fell away and revealed true motivations. Who'd stayed for love versus who'd stayed for convenience. They'd built a smaller circle now, but stronger and genuine. Hazel's laughter filled the new house. Power tools hummed in the garage on weekend afternoons. Peace wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet Saturday mornings without automatic transfers depleting bank accounts. Evenings without angry voicemails demanding explanations. The lesson crystallized into clarity. Protect your peace like software code. Test boundaries rigorously. Commit changes permanently. Deploy without regret.